You ever wonder what happens when a real superpower just falls apart? For India, when its first great empire, the Mauryan Empire, collapsed, it wasn't just an ending. Oh no. It was the explosive start of something else entirely. A 400-year epic filled with chaos, invasion, and, believe it or not, some absolutely stunning creativity.
I mean, think about it. You've got this one single power holding everything together, and then, poof, it's gone. What fills that vacuum? Well, for India after the Mauryas, this wasn't just some political shuffle. It was a complete reset button on their entire culture and society.
And boy, what a battle it turned out to be. We're talking about the collapse happening around 182 BC, and from that moment on, the entire Indian subcontinent basically becomes the ultimate prize. It's the stage for this massive, sprawling conflict that lasts for centuries and ends up forging the very identity of India as we know it.
So let's break it down. The Mauryan Empire, you gotta understand, was this tightly controlled, centralized machine. Everything, and I mean everything, flowed from the emperor. But then its last ruler, a guy named Brihadratha, gets assassinated by his own general. Just like that, the central pillar holding the whole thing up gets kicked out, and the entire structure, it just came crashing down.
And it happened instantly. The empire just shattered. All those provinces that had been kept in line for so long, they saw their chance for freedom, and they took it. At the same time, you've got ambitious invaders looking in from beyond the borders, seeing all this chaos and thinking, this is it. This is our chance. The race to pick up the pieces was officially on.
So, this whole epic struggle really boils down to two main teams, if you will. On one side, you have the homegrown heirs. These are the local Indian kingdoms trying to rise from the ashes and build their own new empires. And on the other side, the foreign contenders, a relentless wave of invaders pouring in from Central Asia.
All right, so let's start with the locals, the homegrown teams. The second the Mauryan grip started to weaken, these regional players, they didn't just walk away. No, they sprinted for the exit, straight towards independence. Now, to really get this, there's a key term you need to know: feudatory. A feudatory is basically a subordinate ruler. They hold land under a bigger empire. They pledge allegiance, they pay tribute, they do the whole bowing and scraping thing. But really, they're just waiting, biding their time for that one moment the big boss looks weak enough to take on.
And the best example of this, the most successful of these feudatories, were the Satavahanas. They waited for their moment, broke free, and managed to carve out a huge kingdom right in the Deccan, which is central India. Their entire story for centuries would be defined by this brutal, long-running rivalry against one of those key invading groups, the Shakas.
Okay, so now let's flip over to the other side, the invaders. And their story, funnily enough, doesn't start on India's border. Nope, it starts thousands of miles away, with the Great Wall of China. Kind of weird, right? It set off this massive, unbelievable domino effect. So you have this powerful tribe, the Yuezhi, and they're blocked from entering China by the new Great Wall. What do? They don't go home. They turn west. And in doing so, they bump into the Scythians, or Shakas, and push them out. The Scythians then push into other territories, and on it goes, until the very last domino in the chain, the Indo-Greeks, get shoved right over the Hindu Kush Mountains and spill into a very vulnerable India.
And get this, they were just the first wave. Over the next couple of centuries, they're followed by the Shakas, then the Parthians, and finally the Kushans. And the Kushans? They were actually part of that Yuezhi tribe that started the whole thing. It's wild. Each one of these groups came in and fought for their piece of northwest India.
But here's the really fascinating part. This whole period wasn't just about swords and shields. All this clashing between the local dynasties and the foreign invaders, it actually ignited this incredible cultural explosion. It was a time of intense mixing that forged a totally new, kind of hybrid Indian identity. People started borrowing ideas, adapting things, innovating in ways that nobody could have possibly predicted.
I mean, just look at their coins. Before this, Mauryan coins were just these anonymous punch-marked symbols. But the Indo-Greeks, they brought coins with these super realistic, individual portraits of their kings. For the very first time, money had a face on it. It became personal. It was like a little piece of propaganda you could carry around in your pocket. Oh, and they were also the first ones to issue gold coins in India, a real game changer.
And this fusion, it wasn't just about physical objects. It went so much deeper. There's this famous text, The Questions of King Milinda, which is literally a record of these deep philosophical debates between an Indo-Greek king named Menander and a Buddhist sage.
I mean, just stop and think about that. You've got a Greek ruler from the tradition of Socrates and Plato getting way into the weeds of Buddhist philosophy. Incredible.
You can actually see this blending carved in stone. It's called Gandhara art. It's what happens when you take Greek and Roman artistic styles, their realism, their techniques, and you apply them to Indian Buddhist subjects. So you get a statue of the Buddha, but he's got the flowing robes and the hyper-realistic facial features of a Greek god. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's a perfect physical symbol of this cultural mixing.
But at the center of this whole period, the real main event was this epic rivalry. You had the homegrown Satavahanas versus the invading Shakas. And they fought tooth and nail for control of those super lucrative Western trade routes. This was the heavyweight championship fight for the future of India.
Ultimately, though, the group that really came out on top of everyone else? The Kushans. Remember them? They created this vast, powerful empire that basically became the masters of the Silk Road. By controlling that massive artery of global trade, they connected the great civilizations of the time, Rome, Persia, and China, with India sitting right in the middle of it all. They were the ultimate middlemen.
So when you look back, this period that we call chaos was really anything but a dark age. It was this incredibly dynamic, transformative time that laid the groundwork for a whole new, globally connected India.
And if you need one simple fact to prove it, think about this number, 2. That's how many capitals the Kushan Empire had. They had one up in Central Asia, looking outwards to the rest of the world, and another one at Mathura, deep in the Indian heartland. They literally had one foot in each world, and they were the bridge that connected them.
So the legacy of this whole era is just huge. It gave India brand new art forms like Gandhara. It introduced new ideas about what it means to be a king with these grand titles like Son of God. It even brought in new styles of clothing like trousers and long coats. But maybe the most important thing it did was transform India from a mostly self-contained subcontinent into a critical hub, a crossroads for the entire ancient world.
Which brings us to one last question, right? When we see a great empire fall, our first instinct is to see only the chaos, the destruction. But as we've just seen, this period was also this incredible engine of creation, of fusion, of reinvention. So, which one was it? Chaos